Hey, it's Neil Parfit here. Welcome to video number 35 of getting started with the ER-301 sound computer. I honestly can't believe it, but it's literally been 6 months since my last video about this, and I don't know what happened. My schedule got completely away from me. I was working on a movie and a bunch of cartoons, and time just sort of evaporated. And here we are. So I hope everybody's doing well, and everybody's having fun with their 301s, and new users have these modules now, and you're all excited. But I'm excited because within those 3 months, or sorry, 6 months, we're now onto a new OS. Before we were at 0.2, and now we're at 0.3. And there's been a lot of revisions. We're actually up at 0.3.22. There's been a lot of changes and tweaks and all these things. So I thought it was the perfect time to make a video. So basically, I'm just going to outline a lot of the new sort of GUI changes, because if you're a new user or you've updated your OS following some of those old videos, you might be like, you know what, I see what's going on, but some of this looks really different, so what the hell's happening? So here we go. Let me outline some of these changes. I guess the most important thing to say first is all the concepts I've gone over and just those ideas and things, all that routing and all that sort of strategy for that kind of thing is still the same. The handling of chains and subchains, input assignments, all this is still the same. We still have our inputs, select, we still have local controls for custom units, we have global chains. This stuff is all the same. The way you use the encoder to highlight things and menu operations, the same. So I'm just going to go over the stuff that's changed just to make it more clear if it is unclear. So here we go. First thing that's changed is unit selection. So the first part of it's exactly the same. You're in an empty channel, chain, wherever you are. If I want to insert a unit, I just move my cursor thingy into the empty area, press insert, and we get our list. And unlike before, which was sort of an endless scrolling horizontal list of stuff, this is now changed to a vertical scrolling list. So we have our list, and if we use the encoder, we can scroll up and down between a whole bunch of stuff. I actually prefer this because it's easier to see a whole bunch of things at the same time instead of skimming, 20 units to the left or right. You get a better bird's eye view of stuff here. And it sort of works intuitively as you'd expect. If I want that delay as an example, I just make sure that row is highlighted, and then I press the soft key right underneath it. So if I want the clock delay, it's highlighted, I just press M3 below it, and we're up and running as we'd expect. So if I want to add another unit, same as before, just insert, I just nav to what I want. Let's say I want a reverb after that delay. I just make sure it's highlighted, touch either of these soft keys underneath it because it's taking 2 spaces, and we're off and running. So that stuff, that's pretty much the same concept. It's just vertical instead of horizontal. The one added touch I really like, though, is usually if you're building functions and stuff, you're always using the same units for processing. You might be adding envelopes or VCAs and stuff. When I go to insert, your most recently used units also sort of bubble to the top, so you don't always have to navigate down into this stuff. This will just populate with more things. So if I, as an example, added a sine wave, and then I added a grain delay, now if I go to insert a unit, those things are all popped up into the top. So it's just kind of cool because it saves a bunch of time instead of having to skim around. Just a nice little touch. So let's talk about the second most, refined feature change. That would be the submenus of units. So let's insert a unit that's a little bit more complex. So I'm going to pick a new unit, actually. I'm going to pick the pedal looper. So this is a classic example of where we have a unit with a really simple interface, but it actually has a lot more controls under the hood that you can modify. So for that, all you have to do is just highlight over the unit's header and press enter. Oh, no, I lied, sorry. All you have to do is highlight over the unit and just press the soft key underneath it. And now, sort of like that unit select menu, we have this vertical sort of menu with a bunch of parameters. And all these parameters relate to this specific unit. So this pedal looper gives us maximum recording time, its behavior of the looper, how it's going to pass the input signal for monitoring, and then we can rename the unit, and we can load and save a preset of that unit. So as before, just a few new kind of interface things here that weren't in 0.2. So we have these sort of options here. After record, what do you want to do? Play, overdub, or stop. If I press the soft key underneath, you can see that the appropriate function highlights and the others sort of gray out or yellow out or whatever you want to call it. So that's one kind of behavior. The next is on the inputs. This is a little bit of a different kind of behavior where each one of these parameters is independent. So I can choose when to pass my input signal. During record, sure. During play, maybe not. Maybe during overdub as well. And maybe when the player is stopped, I want to hear the input signal as well. So you have full control over all these things just by a simple on and off kind of toggle, which is great. And these sort of functions are the same as before. If I'm running a rename a unit, hit the corresponding soft key, gives me sort of a little text editor. And just like before, this hasn't changed. I can just nav to what I want to call this, hit the appropriate soft keys, and I'm good to go. So now this thing is called loop instead of pedal looper. So you can rename it to something that makes sense to you as you're working. Another thing, which it was my initial mistake when doing this, let's say you have a unit, sort of a set and forget kind of parameter, like maybe you're using a sine wave oscillator as a fixed kind of control for something. So once you've set all these, you don't want to touch it ever again. So with that being the situation, I don't want all this stuff visible anymore. I just want it sort of there. I know what it is. I never want to touch this stuff again. If you highlight over the header and hit enter, it'll just collapse it down into a single soft key sort of footprint, and you don't have all this extra junk on the screen cluttering up your workflow. So let's say I want to add like a reverb to that, which is kind of ridiculous based on how slow this is. But anyway, whatever. Let's say I had this, it was set and forget. I'm like, great, I never want to adjust those parameters again, or I already have a chain going to it doing something. I don't want to mess it up by accident. I can go over it, hit enter, and it's collapsed down into a little thing like that. So that's pretty useful if you have like a really complicated chain. Instead of scrolling through like 10 pages of parameters, I've just saved myself 2 pages of scrolling. Like before, I can hit delete. I can get rid of these. There's actually a global preference for an are you sure yes or no. In my case, I have it disabled, so it deletes stuff right away. But if you're working with like really complicated custom units and subchains, you might want to have that preference turned on. So if I go to administration, notice this menu is still kind of like the unit select. All the stuff is organized. I can go to system settings. Let's see. Confirmation when deleting a unit. Yes, please. So now it's set to yes. So if I go to delete this now, and let's say it was a really complicated thing, instead of it just blowing out right away, I have that little bit of peace of mind. Are you sure? No, I actually want that. Oh. Or you can be like, yep, I don't want it anymore. Delete Freeverb. So another, I guess that's sort of the same. Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain bubble there. Actually, another important change. Not really a change, more of like a sort of a feature enhancement is, let's say I have a signal. I'll just add a sine wave. So let's say I have a sine wave doing something, It could be anything. It could be any kind of signal. And let's say after that I have something processing it. So maybe it's like a filter or something like that. And for whatever reason, I just want to see what the scope is doing as I'm modifying these parameters. Currently I can't because I'm seeing a subchain assignment for this parameter. So I can't see a scope. I know that there's something happening because the meter at the end of the chain has something happening, but I want to be able to see what the signal's doing as I'm messing around with this. So for almost any parameter, you can highlight it, and if you hit enter, it sort of grabs that one parameter, hides all the other ones in that unit, and then you get a scope to the left. So you can sort of see what's going on as you're tweaking something. As far as I know, though, I believe this signal is pre-unit, though. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I lied. It's been changed, which is great. It's post-process, which is awesome. So now I can like really double check and make sure, is this doing to the signal what I want it to do? Actually, a good example of that is maybe I'm working with some CV control, and maybe I'm working with an offset, and I just want to make sure the offset's doing exactly what I need it to do. So I can just, as I'm manipulating the parameter, I can see exactly what it's doing to that signal, which is great. I like using this if I'm playing with like a wavefolder, or that kind of thing, where I can really double check and make sure I'm tweaking the signal the way it's supposed to be being tweaked. Because sometimes numbers alone don't help. I need a visual confirmation that the wave looks correct. And if you want to get out of this, all you have to do is highlight it, press enter again, and you're back to where you were before. So this is like pretty much on any unit. So I could be like, I'm on my sine wave. I want to be able to control the frequency, but just see the signal. And there we are. So that's kind of cool. And to get out of it, I just have to make sure I hit enter again. Or, you know what, you could just leave it like that. Sometimes you just want to be able to see it, which is fine. I mean, there's no rules, right? So there's our, and this gets really interesting if you have a subchain. So if I have a subchain of this, let's say I'm controlling the frequency with my mod wheel, and you can see me moving it. It's right here, it's A3. If I assign this to A3, I can see it right there. I'm going to up the gain a little bit. So now I'm adjusting my mod wheel on my Waldorf, and I have real-time feedback visually of what I'm doing. So I can be like, you know what, maybe my gain's too high. Maybe I want to fine-tune it. I can go from coarse to fine on my gain adjustments. And there we go. I got a little bit of a finer control. I could go negative for it to work backwards. Lots of choice here. So that's I think it's called contextual view. I'd have to double check with Brian. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. But yeah, this function is available for almost every unit. Let's go a little bit deeper. I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of two units that I really like, that have really gotten better. Well, one's gotten better and one is brand new. So let me just show you what we got. So new unit, pedal looper. So this behaves as you'd expect. You can record something, and as soon as you stop recording, that file is going to loop immediately, which is great. And we can use this for all sorts of things. It could be an outside source like a mic. It could be CV. It really doesn't matter. It's up to you. In my case, I'm going to use this in a weird way. Maybe. Let's just see. So I'm going to go to my my parameters for this. I'm going to highlight the header, hit I did it wrong again. Highlight the header, hit the soft key. I like the play mode. I actually don't want to pass the input because my speaker is really close to my mic, so I don't want a feedback loop. And you know what? The maximum loop time, I'm just going to set to 10 seconds, and we're good to go. All I need to do now is just assign an input. So my input is input 1. I can see that meter dancing. Check, check, check. I'm going to assign it. Check. So this works as you'd sort of expect for a looper. If I hit record it's going to start recording immediately. And the moment I stop recording, it's going to loop whatever's there up to 10 seconds. You can do this manually, which I'm going to do. But the interesting thing about this is you can have this being controlled from a CV source. So you could get some really nutty sort of things happening with layering if you had like really fast pings of the record button. But in my case, I'm going to do this manually. So bear with me. I'm going to make a really stupid loop. So here we go. Hopefully this will be in time. Let's see what happens. So, oh, sorry. Did the wrong thing again. See, I'm still getting used to this, which is fine. Here we go. So I think I have to focus for this to fire. Oh yeah, because underneath fire is the focus button. If it's coming from a chain, it will hit that and go into the record button. That was my bad. So anyway, I'm over the record button and I have to hit the button under fire, which then goes to the record play overdub. So here we go. So there's my first loop. Oh, it's slightly late, but it's okay. So it's currently playing. The interesting thing now is I can change my mind and hit undo, and we're back to 0 again. So we don't have to go in and like reassign buffers or any of that stuff. It's just like ready to go. So you know what? That was a bad loop. I'm going to just try it again. So here we go. Boot, boo, boot, boo, boot. And did it work? No, I screwed it up again. Okay, I'm going to undo. I'm going to stop. I'm going to clear. Right back to 0. Let's try this one more time. All right, here we go. That's close enough, sure. So if I hit focus again, now it's going to overdub on top of that loop. So if I'm happy with that, cool. Or I can undo, and I have one level I can go back, which is great. So if I hit record to overdub again, these two layers are going to bake in, and that's it. So here we go. So if I undo, I'll lose that, but I can't go back any further. So these two are baked in, but at least I still have one step I can go back, right? So there we go. There is my pedal looper. You can use these for whatever you want, but I'm gonna take this a step further now. I'm gonna take this file out of this pedal looper. So we have that file in there, but we have to be able to turn this into something we can use. So instinctively you'd be like, well, it's probably in the sample pool. So if I go to admin and we look at our sample pool, it's not in there. This is the first unit that has its own sort of invisible buffer. So what we have to do is go to the unit's sort of extended menu, and right at the top, copy 2.3 seconds of audio to, and we want to create a new buffer out of that. Copied. So it's created a file, and now we can use that somewhere. If we go to our admin, we now have this loop, not assigned to anything, but it's sitting in the buffer that we can use. So I'm going to show you a new, I guess it's not really a new unit, it's just an extension of an older sample slicer unit, but now it's actually called the variable speed player. So I'm going to highlight that. Sort of looks the same as before. Just like before, you have to attach a buffer file to it. So if I hit this, we have a whole bunch of options here, but the first thing we need to do is select a file we want to use. So in our case, it's not sitting on the card because I haven't saved it. It's sitting in the pool. So I'm going to go select from pool. There it is. I'm going to hit enter. So there's our loop. And if I, just like before, if I trigger this, it's going to play. So I can actually assign this, like before, to an external source. So I'm going to use the gate of my Waldorf. So I'm going to go to the subchain of that gate. I'm going to assign it my my gate control, A1. And now, so there is my sample. So if we go into the that menu again, we have some playback option here. Because that's a looped sound, maybe I want to repeat. So if I hit repeat, it's sort of freewheeling now. And now I can go in here and that's so strange. I can assign a volt for octave control. In this case, I'm going to use my keyboard, A2. So this sort of behaves the same as before. I'm just going to stop the playback mode for a second. You know what? I've changed my mind. I don't want to use that sample anymore. So a new feature is I can go to that sample player and I can say detach. And now that file has been taken out. So I'm going to do something new here. I'm going to add a new pedal looper. And I'm going to set the recording time to 30 seconds maximum. And I'm just going to record a few things here. I actually really like using the looper as just like a scratch pad to get samples into the machine. So here's an example. So bear with me. This will all make sense soon. Here we go. Okay, so there's my loop I've created. It's only looping because it's in the looper, but I actually just wanted to create a file really quickly. So I'm going to go to pedal looper, new buffer. It's created it. I can get rid of this looper. I'm going to assign that new file to this Varispeed player. Select from pool. It's this 2.4 meg file. It's longer. It's 13.2 seconds. Okay, so let's just wait for this to finish playing. So here's where all the new stuff gets really cool. So if we go into our slicer menu, this has been fully revamped and it's kind of great. So I want to get in here. I'm going to hit slice again. Oh, I'm going to hit enter, sorry. And now we have a revamped kind of menu. Before it took us into this different place, now we have our sort of contextual view of just that slice. But check it out here. We have two additional menus here. First one is zoom. So if I hold down zoom, I can use the wheel to really get in here and see what's happening. But the most important one is slice. If we go into slice, we have a brand new editor to be able to slice up this audio. And remember, slicing is different start positions that the sampler can play from. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to back out. I'm going to go back into my full view so I see all my parameters. I'm going to assign a gate to my keyboard. Oh, actually, I already did before. So that's that. I'm going to turn my volume down. I'm going to assign the slice control to my mod wheel on the Waldorf. So let's see, that looks like it's A3. And I'm going to set the gain so my fader will go all the way to the top. Okay. So check this out. This is where it gets really interesting. So I'm going to go into my slicer view. So let's see how this works. This is completely revamped and different than before. First things first, this is a new kind of behavior. If you click and hold this coarse button, or this button while the light is set to coarse, I have horizontal zoom in and out of my waveform. If it's set to fine and I hold down, I have a vertical height adjustment, and it will tell you how much sort of, it's not adding gain, it's just sort of increasing the viewable scale of that wave. So, you know, if you really need to get in there and double check stuff, you can really zoom in either direction. So that's the first kind of new thing we haven't seen before. So we can really get in there. We can choose here to decide how this encoder is going to work. If we're on slices, this will go between all the different slices. Currently we have none. If I'm on cursor, I have free reign over this waveform. Actually, I'm going to moosh this down a little bit. There we go. So I have free control over sort of seeing what's going on. And if it's under follow, visually I will just see what happens when I trigger this sampler. So I'm hitting my key. So you can notice right off the top that if I go to cursor mode, I have all this junk, like this sort of dead space at the beginning that I will never want. This is garbage audio. So here's a new thing. I can hold down Shift while I'm in cursor mode. And if I hold down Shift and then move the encoder, now I can actually highlight parts of the waveform, which is great because we couldn't do this easily before. So I can highlight this stuff. I can be like, you know what? I don't want this. And here's the next new bunch of stuff. If I hit menu, now we have a whole bunch of tools that we didn't have before to manipulate this sound. So I don't want that sound there. So I'm going to say cut. Are you sure? Yes, because this is destructive. And there we go. Now all that crap off the intro is gone. So I can navigate forward. You know what? Maybe I want this gap for whatever reason for organization. I can highlight this. I still want that gap there, but I can say silence and it will give me digital 0 there instead of my noise from my studio and my microphone and stuff. Same thing here. I can be like, you know what? I don't want there to be any, I want that gap there, but I just don't want the sound there. So I can go to menu and I can go to silence. Are you sure? Yes. Cool. And you know what? The end, I actually don't want any of this crap. I can highlight it, menu, cut. Are you sure? Great. And what we didn't have before is I can be like, you know what? The ending of this is pretty abrupt. I just want to fade out that file just so it's nice and smooth. Highlighted it, menu, fade out. Are you sure? And there we go. We got a nice fade. So it's going to sound all pretty and beautiful. Although I don't think my voice is salvageable, but you know, it's a dream. So that's some sort of audio manipulation. Next most important thing in here is the slicer. Slicer, the idea is you can add a whole bunch of points across the waveform, and as the sample is triggering, you can flip slices and the file will jump to that immediately. So here's an example. So I'm going to add a slice right off the top, slice marker. I'm also going to add one at the next waveform. And I'm also going to add one right here. And this is where the zoom stuff is great because you can really zoom in. You can tell I was slightly out. I can get right in there, add my slice, and it's going to snap to the 0 crossing. There is an actual preference for that in system preferences, but I have it turned on, so you can see it jumped there. So here we go. I got